All right, welcome back, coaches, to our RugbyWA coaching series in our high performance area. Today, we're very lucky to have another international coach, Phil Davies, who's been to a couple of World Cups, and we'll get the opportunity to find a little bit more around those World Cup programs and the review process that came with that. We have Steve Anderson back as always to bring his experience and charm to the group. And do you want to come in and introduce Phil to the webinar?
I think you're getting a little bit too familiar with me, Dylan. You can't be saying words like charm. Ando and charm don't go together.
I was thinking Ando, charm, Bundy. That's a good combination with rum.
All right. Well, look, thanks once again, coaches, for joining us. And as Dylan said, we've got a very highly esteemed coach in Phil Davies, very good personal friend of mine and colleague, former colleague. Way back when. Probably owe you a few pints, I think, Phil, for this one. But I very much appreciate your preparation. As the guys on that have joined us tonight, the audience, they're aware that we do a lot of prep leading into these sessions. So once again, Phil, very much appreciated for your time. We spent several hours putting this together last week for you, and hopefully what you present tonight will provide a little bit more depth, particularly around the subject matter of review. For me, just as an intro to Phil, I'm not going to try and... Phil doesn't need an introduction, guys. We did send out his profile, but just for me, just before I hand over to Phil, review for me, for those that are on the line that have worked with me, is such a critical element in terms of how we go about our business and how we conduct our business. The process of review has several layers. I'm not going to go into the labelling of it, but certainly assessment, evaluation. It goes right back down into the micro levels of our programming, right through to the macro level. And I think what Phil has been able to do for us tonight, as you'll see, is give real live, active and actual examples of what's gone on in his programs to explain the process of review at the various layers. But for me, it's one of the most critical aspects of our work as coaches, not just at a HP level. One of the themes and underbellies or underbelly approach with all our webinar coaching series has been to acknowledge that most of the themes that are presented at elite level are consistent at all levels of the game. So online tonight, we've got premier coaches, we've got pathway coaches, and we've got academy coaches. You'll find a lot of generic areas, but I'm sure you'll see a different layers and different levels presented by Phil that you'll go, well, okay, yeah, I do that. I actually do that in the performance of my work in the pathway. And as I said, this is one of the constant themes that we've tried to present. The elements at elite level are just probably diluted somewhat when you get down into the underage levels or the premier coach level. But they're very constant and very consistent in our work. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Phil. And Phil, maybe just to break the ice in that nice, very Welsh brogue that you have, just talk for a minute just around your history and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you, Steve and Dylan, for inviting me. It's wonderful to be part of the series. I really enjoy chatting, about coaching and interacting with aspiring coaches and just, like-minded people. So thank you first and foremost for, the opportunity to share my experiences the last 20 odd years and interact with you guys. And yeah, I finished playing rugby in 1995, I think it was. Seems an eternity ago now. But I always wanted to coach, enjoyed playing captaincy as a player, enjoyed leading, very intrigued about the game, technically, tactically. I was very fortunate, Steve, where we first met, to have a coaching offer in Leeds, where we were in the 3rd division at that time of English rugby. And we stayed there for 10 years, building and growing the club with some tremendous people, both on and off the field. And that was my first interaction into coaching. And then, I came back to Wales to coach. I'm coached back in England as an assistant coach. I wanted the experience of an assistant coach because I'd never been an assistant coach prior to going to Worcester to work with Richard Hill, the ex-England scrum half, in 2010. That was a good experience. Learned what assistant coaching is all about. And then more recently, been lucky to, with the World Rugby Tier 2 program, be involved with Namibia for 5 years and taken them to 2 World Cups, which have been quite an amazing experience, really, coaching in Africa. It's a lot warmer than Wales, that's for sure. That's a bit of a snapshot, really, of where I've ended up over the last 20-odd years as a coach. And the major thing I've learned, really, I think, is the importance of planning and then continuously, sort of reviewing that plan over the course of time. And it's about being process-driven for me, not sort of outcome-driven, So that's my sort of view on the topic we're going to discuss, really process-driven and not outcome-driven, and the importance of review within all of that,
Thanks, Phil. Obviously undersold yourself a little bit there, mate, but it's always difficult to provide a snapshot of a career, both playing and coaching at a professional level, 30 plus years, mate. 20 years in the pro coaching is a long time, and obviously to survive and be still active is testimony to your philosophies on the game. A lot of coaches, as you know, don't survive the rigours of pro rugby. So, mate, well done. So, just for the benefit of the audience, as I said, we did a fair bit of preparation with Phil last week, leading into this particular subject. So, Phil, as we've chatted, I'm very interested in just forming a foundation of definition around review, and we've got we're going to pose a couple of questions to you. And the first one is basically built around, I'll go to resources, because I think this is one of the most critical aspects of review, and it does influence how much you can do in review. So could you just give us a little bit of a snapshot, firstly of the definition, your definition of review, but also, where does resources fit? And how does it influence or impact on your planning?
It's a good question, Steve. I think my definition of review really is did we do what we said we were going to do? Did we, in the build-up, our intention was to do A, B, C, whatever, and in the preparation, and did we actually do that? So that's my very simplistic view of the review. And the resources, really, you talk about resources, Steve. The resources create your reality. And for me, there's a few steps: having clear objectives, planning properly, obviously, planning correctly, coaching delivery, and then consistent review. And I'll talk about, I call it the DAI system because I'm a Welshman, and DAI is short for David in Wales. And it means discipline, adaptability and intensity, and I'll talk about that as we go along, but that's the review process, and basically the summary of all that is repeat, is plan, action, review, plan, action, review. So those are very important. And one of our very first interactions with the Namibian Rugby Union and the Namibian players, and you talk about resource and adaptability, really, and the reality. In the build-up to the 2015 World Cup, we only had 7 weeks, but we knew the players were not that strong. So we knew we had to improve the strength base, and we didn't have the time or the resource to, use the traditional methods of growing strength. So what we did, we looked at more of a functional strength approach. So like strongman type of work. Tyres, found a lot of tyres in Namibia, a lot of farms, easy to find tyres. Got some sleds built by by one of the players' dads, who was a bit of an engineer. And we also used a lot of drain pipes, would you believe, different lengths, filled them up with sand. Again, plenty of sand in Namibia, plenty of desert. So we sort of took that functional approach in the build-up to the first World Cup, and that was really helpful. And we repeated that. We did a lot of repeated speed work as well, so that the players had, you know, the sort of the speed endurance and the sort of functional strength to cope with the rigors of the competition. But we still came up a little bit short. But that's how we sort of adapted the lack of resource and, you know, adequate facilities in the first instance, Steve, you know.
So Phil, like in terms of your planning, limited resource, if I can use the word, limited, in terms of solutions, like, so you got your plan, you've got your outcomes, and I'm sure you did periodic reviews across each season.
Yes.
You know, what sort of constraints did the limited resources constrict or provide constraint around potential solutions that come out of your review? You know, were there areas where you found in review that we could have done something else better, but it needed additional funding or additional resources, but it wasn't forthcoming? Did you find that at all? Like,
yeah, on a number of occasions, we did actually come up with one term called a pre-mortem, which is quite good. It wasn't my term; it was Calvin Morris, who was working with us from World Rugby at the time. He'd gone to the World Cup with Clive Woodward in 2003, and he'd been at a couple of Olympics with Team GB. So we're looking at it in a couple of different ways. We looked at a pre-mortem prior to the Africa Cup, where we were favourites to win the cup and qualify. So what could go wrong, and what, you know, how could we react if things went wrong? And then that was one way we did it. And then another way we did it was looking at the resources and prioritising our coaching delivery. We were quite forensic in that. So we looked at coaching, we looked at core skills, transitions and set piece. They were the key areas we felt were crucial to grow in the modern game. Obviously, we looked at strength and conditioning and the limitations, you know, we had in terms of gym facilities, in terms of nutrition, you know, in terms of heart rate, GPS monitoring, that type of thing. So we were very prioritised, Steve, in that sense of our delivery. So we looked at it in two different ways. You know, like the pre-mortem thing was new to me, I got to say, before this more recent World Cup, but I enjoyed it because it made you really think about things that might happen and how you could potentially deal with them. And then it was prioritization. You know, as we were moving on, we knew we only had a certain amount of money. We knew what the budgets were, and it made us really prioritize and review really forensically what we needed and what we were doing. You know, like at the first instance, they talked, we haven't got a capacity to film training, but everybody had an iPad, for example. So we said, look, you know, just bring your iPad to training and we'll film training through the iPad, sort of thing, you know. So where, in my view, where there's a will, there's a way. And you know, it's looking at prioritizing. Sometimes it's looking, you know, ahead and trying to, I'm not saying nobody's got a crystal ball, but, you know, you can look at all the key areas of your operation and think what could go wrong, and then actually review, you know, in and around your resources, which create your reality. And you can be very, very functional if you're prepared to be sort of creative in your thinking, you know.
Well, I think, Phil, you hit on a couple of good points there around adaptability, but I think the prioritisation of your work must be a part of your process of review, with or without, you know, a multitude of resources and availability of resource. I think adaptability is critical, but also prioritising within your review processes has to be fundamental to the overarching program. Excellent response, Phil. The next part of that question, I'm just going to stay on this a little bit, Phil, if you don't mind.
No, it's great.
I just want to focus on the benefit of review. You know, where do you see the major benefit of a review process?
One of the, in terms of developing performance, obviously, Steve, and I'll give a context. When we went to Namibia, first of all, we looked at a lot of videos before we went. We went to watch a lot of matches there, and we looked at, right, if somebody had to say, sum up Namibian rugby for me in 2 words, I'd say courage and flair. And with that, with the review process thereafter, we looked at how we could develop technical skill, how we could develop tactical skill, because we were a bit like Brazil in football. We'd score 5 and we'd let 4 in, type of thing. And that wasn't good for my blood pressure at that time. So we looked at things of how we could, improve. So we had a core skill carousel, for example, breakdown, handling, catching, tackle technique, for example. Transition, we used like a 2-ball practice to see how quickly we could get, into counter-attack shape or into turnover defense shape. And then we looked at our set plays. We weren't the biggest guys, so we worked on a lot of quick line-out ball to speed the tempo of the game up. And, a lot of technical work with the scrum to make sure that we could just stay in the fight and get the ball out. So those were the things that came from, the review process when we initially got there, and how we then built that over a 4-year period. Because in the first instance, we had 7 weeks before the first World Cup in England in 2015. And then obviously prior to that, we'd review where the process and the program and the outcomes of the tournament. And then we went on a 4-year journey, which gave us a bit more time to develop, But we wouldn't have been able to do anything, Steve, as you keep saying, unless we had a clear plan and then a clear review process, which we had to do on a regular basis. And we did it on a daily basis, we did it on a weekly basis, we did it on a bi-weekly, monthly. There were lots of, it wasn't sort of, we weren't meetinged out, if you like. It wasn't analysis by paralysis type of thing, but it was, it was a very simple plan that we constantly reviewed to see if we were progressing to the objectives we knew we needed to in order to play, and be competitive at Tier 1 level.
Yep. Okay.
So
Thanks.
I'll just jump in there, Ando.
Yep.
DJ just wanted to jump in and around just your views, how you win a review and what success means to you. DJ, you want to come in, mate?
Thanks, Dale. Phil, thank you very much for doing this tonight, mate.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. Thank you.
Phil, my question was just at the start there, you said you are more outcome or process more than outcome. So how does that fit in with your high HP environment? How did you set your expectations for your team? How did you review those expectations and targets? And what was success in your environment? Now, I understand that the process makes a better product, but when coaching Namibia, how did you set your targets for like the likes of playing New Zealand or playing a real Tier 1 nation?
A great question. That was a great question. What we did, I'll take us back to this recent World Cup. It was performance driven, and it was all about layering our effectiveness and efficiency in our skills and our team organisation as we were going to the tournament. Because our first game was Italy, and that was obviously a Tier 1 nation. Now, our last Tier 1 game was Argentina in 2015. We'd not played a Tier 1 nation before that. So we knew, within reason, we're not going to win that game. We thought we could get quite close. So we put a theme together of scoring tries and speed, basically, of making sure that we, if they were getting 2 around the corner, we were getting 2 around the corner. So we set some real performance targets with and without the ball. And then we went to South Africa. Again, we weren't going to beat South Africa, but we wanted to keep the score down. I know that may sound a bit of a negative way, but it's realistic goal setting, obviously, and performance development. So against South Africa, we wanted to, make a difference. We wanted each player to make a difference in his position. We wanted to, be successful in stopping their maul. I think they had 7 driving mauls in our 22 and only scored twice. So that was, we didn't want them to get over 50% conversion, which we achieved. And then the New Zealand game, was all about Everest. We talked about climbing Everest, and we talked about the breakdown in particular of how we could produce quick ball. So again, we weren't going to go in and have a big physical battle with the New Zealanders because we're not strong enough. So we looked at a tactic that could produce 2-second ball for us, and how many times then we could get over 6 phases in that game. And that led us to the final game against Canada, where we felt we could beat them. So we looked at growing we had key performance areas that we wanted to achieve. We set the players' targets, which we achieved on the way. So when we got to the Canadian week, we felt we were efficient and effective enough in the key areas that we could potentially beat Canada. We were number 23 in the world, and they were number 22. So that's how we actually developed the process, and that's what the outcomes looked like. So we had a lot of success in our performance outcomes, and that led us to go into our last game, Dan, with confidence that we could compete and potentially beat the Canadians, and that would have been our first World Cup win ever. But then the typhoon got in the way of that, unfortunately. So we didn't play the game, but we were, we're all sort of thinking we were ready to play. So we'll keep that thought. Some of the Namibian players will die wondering in that respect, I suppose. But that's how we planned it. Hopefully that makes sense. It was just key performance indicators along the way, set from realistic expectations of how we can improve during each match.
Fantastic. Just to lead on to that, if I can ask a second question, Dylan, if I may.
Yeah, no problem, Stage.
As a pro coach, so when you were Cardiff and Scarlets, as a pro coach, when money comes into it, how does your outcome versus process change? Has it changed or does it change?
It does change, obviously, because you're trying to win every game. When you're going in as a coach, you want to win every game. It's obvious. One of the key things I found in those two positions was managing up. I know maybe this goes against a review or whatever, Steve, but when I reviewed those two positions, it is very, very important that you manage up well. You manage expectations of the people above you, and you continually take them on a journey, which doesn't give them any surprises. Ultimately, I wouldn't change my approach at all in terms of because process driven for me gives performance development, and ultimately performance development will produce winning on a consistent basis. But it's a managing up that allows you, and you have to win a certain amount of games. I believe you've got to win today to survive tomorrow, type of thing. So there's a real balance that you've got to try and achieve there, I believe. I'm managing up with a board and having a specific criteria that everybody understands, and you take them on a journey, and you try not to give them surprises. Those are the key things that I've learned about professional sport, professional rugby when the money comes into it. The process for me remains the same. It's just the managing of the expectations change.
Awesome. Phil, thanks very much for that, mate.
It's okay. Pleasure. Thanks. Good questions.
Keep going, Bill. Bill?
Yeah, no, we're straight into it. That was the only question.
You got two on your chat there, mate. Do you want to go to them?
No, nothing's come through to me.
All right. Actually, just on, I'll just go back to the discussion there, Phil, on managing up. And I'm sure we've all been caught as coaches in this respect. I mean, no matter how much clarity you give, and this is important for all coaches, no matter how much clarity you give on the journey, the important point that Phil raised for me, which resonated with me, was you must win. So the balancing act between longevity, sustainability of your position and your portfolio, your development of your list management, which changes, periodically, obviously, as players age and the groups age, right down to succession planning with your staff and your players. So no matter how much clarity you give to those, it should be a priority that you give clarity to your board, as an example, managing up. But the key is that you have to win. So if you can find the answer around the balancing act with that, you've probably got a job as a professional coach for the rest of your life. It's hard work. Sorry, Phil.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, Steve. What I've learned is maybe as you're going along your coaching journey, being open. And what I mean by that is, I've coached at professional level, but I've also enjoyed coaching semi-professional level, development level, to keep learning, stay in the saddle, to keep current. That's important. I remember talking to one international coach. He said, there's no way am I coaching different levels other than the top level. But as we all know, the top level, the jobs are few and far between. And I think if you want to continue on your journey, you have to, be open-minded to continuous learning. And that might not, there's a means to an end to certain positions. And that's what I've always looked at. I love coaching. I love giving back experiences. And some of the more richer experiences I've had have not been, the likes of coaching at the Blues with Warburton and Halfpenny, or at the Scarlets back in the day with Stephen Jones and Dwayne Peel and all these guys, is coaching some of the more development roles I've taken on, where you really can make a difference to young people's lives, not just on the field, but off the field, Steve, that's important. And number two is what I've learned about when you're looking for positions, it's getting the right job, not the next job. I'm making sure that there's a cultural fit between, yourself and the chairman, or yourself and the board, if you like. So, for example, I'm a big advocate of an academy, of giving young people opportunities. Now, if the board have that same psychology, same psyche, same philosophy, that's great. There's a fit. But if they just want to win week in, week out, or win at all costs, you've got a difference of opinion, or a difference in philosophies. So I think, being open-minded is important at the levels you coach to keep current. Sometimes if you're not at the level you want to be. And secondly is making sure that you do your pre-mortem, I suppose, to find a cultural fit with the people you're going to work with. It's very important,
Without a doubt, Phil. The philosophical battles should be sorted out before you sign. On a lot of occasions, there might be some issues around clarity in that respect from both parties, the coach and the generally the chairman and the CEO. But it should be very clear and concise around what your long-term vision is and what you bring to the club or the franchise before you start. As I said, sometimes it goes a bit wayward during your tenure and can ultimately cost you a position. Thanks for that question, DJ. It led into a couple of different or very significant areas. So, Phil, just if you don't mind, if we could start on some of the areas that we discussed with regards to, predictors and KPIs inside the review process. If you like to use your slides to get to that point, that'd be great.
Yes, I'll show a little video to start. That'll be good.
Even better. Moving pictures, even better.
Correct. So is Dylan going to give me this?
Yep, so you should be able to just take control, mate. So you just share your screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, I'll just go. Right. Oh, bye. Hopefully this will share, boys. Steve, can you see that?
It's just coming up. It says Phil Davies has shared his screen, but there it is. Got it.
Okay. We'll just sort of, set the scene on this. This is the sort of, well, it's clear. It's the coaching pyramid we used So Steve, taking your point for review, is just a point of reference that we were reviewing back to as we were going along the journey. So the phase 1, as you can see, January, Feb was pre-season and strength and conditioning. Then the technical skill competencies, which were the core skills we talked about. Then we were going into competition, Super Sport Challenge, which is the Curry Cup basically. Then we were going into international, so that was provincial competition. Then we were going into an international competition. Then July was about making sure we could get consistency, and then coming out of that international competition. And then August was getting game management clarity, and then going into obviously the tier 1 test match ready. And how we created that situation, we looked at 2 things. Obviously, changing the psyche of tier 2, because they're always thinking they're going to lose against tier 1 or even some of the tier 2 nations. And then it was producing, a clear selection process to the standards that were required to play at tier 1. So we used some metaphors, we used videos, which I'm going to show you, so that the players are always looking at the competition levels that they're playing at. We're not giving them any guesswork. We're actually showing what other people are doing. We're showing some aspirational stuff, inspirational stuff, in order for us to go along the journey and achieve the standards we need to. So that was the process. So we had an educate to motivate in terms of trying to change the psyche. As I said, that was the plan we undertook. And these are the type of things that we looked at in terms of changing their psyche. So this is like a pixelated video, I was told before I saw it. It's not very clear, but that's the way that they wanted to come across in World Rugby. So this was put to the players at the very start of the journey in terms of giving them a real aspiration to why we were doing what we were doing. So it's a couple of minutes, so I hope you enjoy this. It's quite a good video.
Winning is simply a mindset. A mindset, however, that is only developed by outstanding individuals. It's not about talent, it's about effort. Effort will get you the win when the talent is having a rest day. Effort will drive you home when everyone expects you to give up. Effort will drag you from the camp. And however, it is only developed by outstanding individuals. It's not about talent, it's about effort. Effort will get you the win when the talent is having a rest day. Effort will drive you home when everyone expects you to give up. Effort will drag you from the canvas when you have been knocked out by life. Winning is not some special reward only reserved for the lucky among us. If you ask all the failures, they will tell you it is luck, but it's not. Winning is a reward you receive when you have put in the hard work, when no one is watching. Winning is for champion attitudes and champion hearts. If you throw me to the wolves, know that I will return leading the pack. It only takes one moment to decide you are going to be a winner. One moment is all it takes. It only takes one moment to make a decision. One moment to say no, to say never again. Never again will I settle. Never again will I accept anything but first place. One moment to be strong. One moment to separate myself from the rest. Win at all costs. Winning is simply a mindset. A mindset, however, that is only developed by outstanding individuals. individuals. Are you outstanding? Outwork your competition. If you outwork your opponent day in and day out, you will beat him come game day. There is no question. But you have to have commitment and discipline to be better day in and day out, always giving more than your opponent. One more rep, one more set, one more mile. That is what it takes to get the edge. Winning.
So it just goes on like that, Steve, for another 30 seconds. But what we found was that the players loved those motivational videos. They absolutely loved them. But what they didn't know was what it felt like. So we had to put the processes in place. We showed them, and then we had to get them to feel it and experience it in order to move forward. And this last slide here was we came up with the educate to motivate, and then we came up with a Tier 1 test match readiness, which was underpinned by a simple traffic light system. So we looked at, if you're a green player, you could play at tier, you could play 80 minutes at Tier 1. If you're an amber, you can play 70%, and then if you're red, you can play around 50%. So that really helped our selection process, and it helped the players as well, because you had some players who started in the red who ended up, at amber. You had amber players that ended up in the green. So the challenge was to try to get as many green and amber players as we could going into 2019. We used a 10-point metric system. Physical, as you can see there, meters per minute, high-speed meters, accelerations, distance, velocity. Rugby, with tackles, carries, clean-outs, mauls, scrums. They were the most demanding. And then the selection criteria was speed, power, skill, character, intelligence. And then the way we put our final squad balance was durability, versatility, current form. So we were constantly reviewing, Steve, back to these points of reference of what we wanted to achieve before the World Cup. And obviously then the squad number profile, we looked at 18 forwards, 13 backs, within 31's an awkward figure in some ways, but it's what World Rugby looked at. So that's really how we changed the psyche, and how we, continually reviewed and showed the players where they were. So just before the final phase of the plan, this was sort of where we are now. The phase, the ball in play, meters per minute, as you can read. And what we had, the first quarter focus came from a paper that Dave Rennie done. So we did a review on what tier 2 countries needed, going into a World Cup. And what was happening in the first quarter of every match, in the first 20 minutes, tier 2s would normally concede at least 14 points, sometimes 20. So we were out of the game before the game has actually got underway. So we're playing catch up. So that's why we had the first quarter focus. And then obviously we had Mount Fuji in the background there, and that's where we needed to go. So it's where we were and then where we needed to go. And it was underpinned by the selection process, and it was underpinned by the educate to motivate process that we used.
Phil, can you
along the way.
I'll just jump in there with, this is obviously relevant in a lot of different aspects of, building your program and building your team. The area that we've chatted recently about is the psychology of, which you've got, changing the psychology of Tier 2. Can you just elaborate a little bit for the audience, like, the biggest hurdles in that respect, like knowing what the psychology is demanded of a player moving from Tier 2 to Tier 1? It's massive, as you know. Can you just elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, that's obviously that's the performance, but the psychology of it was, Steve, when the Namibian boys, right, they were a real pleasure to coach, and same as the South African lads, they're easy to coach because they're very hardworking and they're very sort of obedient, if you like. If you give them instruction, they'll carry it out to the letter of the law. And as we went on, that was fine. At the start, it was fine. But as we went on, we found that there was a little bit of lack of self-drive when they were away from the group. And also a bit of, lack of self-reliance. We couldn't always rely on them to do the right things in terms of nutrition, because obviously with the weather in Namibia, there's a big braai culture, big barbecue culture like it is in Australia. We don't have that problem in Wales because it's too wet. But it's all those little, the little sort of cultural things of the country. So what we did, we set about, along with this stuff, we talked about, let's be good at the things that require no talent. But for that to happen, we had to increase the self-awareness of the players. And when we increased their self-awareness, obviously their awareness of others increased as well. So we did a diagnostic called Strength Finder, which gave them 34 key signatures of their personalities. But we just focused on the top 5. And we had a guy from South Africa, a psychologist called Simon Hurry, who came in and worked with us. And that was a real changing point in the mentality of the players, because they were becoming more self-aware of what they had to do and the reasons behind why we were doing stuff. And that also increased their awareness of others with the team. So it improved the team dynamic as well. And then we were able to put on a mental skills program for the team as well, which was all based around controlling the controllables, really, controlling your performance before you're worrying or thinking of anything else, sort of thing, So it was all about improving the self-awareness, and that really helped the players. Steve, it really helped them because it alleviated a lot of frustrations they were getting previously because they didn't know. They didn't know, and that's where the educate to motivate phrase came in from our head of strength and conditioning.
So Phil, with this type of process, obviously there's a lot of profiling of the individual and also the group dynamic. That's even more important, which you've touched on. But what sort of issues confronted during that process? Like, just think of the players, or an example of a player that was confronted, or he found this whole process confronting. Is there an individual example where you can think of where some of the players or a player struggled to accept this process?
Well, in a nutshell, the ones who struggled to accept the process left the journey, unfortunately. In some ways. But in other ways, we had a young, just getting to know the players as well. The thing that I found richly rewarding in all of this process was, is getting to know players and building a rapport with players. And some of the things we take for granted, in a tier 1 scenario, it's having proper gym facilities, proper nutrition. Some of these lads had not been in a gym. They were 21, they'd not been in a gym, where some of our boys at tier 1 have been in a gym since they were 16. They weren't used to, proper nutrition. So what we found is by getting to know the players well, we could individualize and adapt certain things to them. Like there was one lad, he came to the World Cup. He's only a 22-year-old, a great kid. Not from a from a one-parent background family, four siblings. He would never be able to put weight on, for example, because his mum would cook whatever she would cook. The 4 of the kids had to eat. If we were asking him to eat more protein or take supplements or whatever, he just couldn't. He couldn't afford to do that. So we had to then adjust and adapt our situation to accommodate those shortfalls in his. So that some of them who totally didn't accept it, Steve, dropped out, unfortunately. Yeah. But by knowing the players, we were able to, alleviate some of those hurdles, obstacles, distractions, call them what you will, in order for them to achieve their dream of representing Namibia at the World Cup. So I think knowing your players and getting the players to know themselves is very important.
Critical. Just one other area that I want to drill back down to is with the data that was derived from this process around the psychology and self-awareness, behavioural type aspects. How did you actually present that to the players?
If you go back to, I'm trying to find something here. This is a bit authentic. Stephen's trying to find a slide that we. Bear with me. It's a slide we did with the players in terms of their development, which was, if I can get, I hope I can get this thing open. Yeah. Can everybody see that one?
Yep.
This was something we did with the players. This is how we presented stuff back to them. You saw some of the charts that we presented back earlier on, and they were all done obviously on an individual level as well. But these are one of the things that we did in the last sort of 12 months of the program, and we looked at it was a book actually by Nas Botha, the ex-South African fly half. It's all about creative thinking. So what we did, we broke it down into technical development, tactical, physical, as you can see, and then mindset. And it was left brain thinking and right brain thinking. And we gave the guys, I think it was a page and a half for them to read what that sort of mindset meant and what type of thinker they were. And then we put these plans in place, and we actually, we did some video work with it. We did live drills on the training field, obviously, and we were constantly reviewing this with the players during the campaigns that we were there, Steve. And that's how we presented this sort of stuff back to the players. And obviously they had the physical side of it, a bit more detail on physical. But this is how we did it I did it from a head coaching point of view, and then we looked at the statistics during games. Like this guy, for example, here, the hooker, he wanted to be a ball carrying threat within the system, so we can go back and show him that on the video and review, poaching work at a breakdown, whether he's, jackling over the ball type of thing. So we were able then to link all this back to obviously the game video performances in the gym, that type of thing,
Just staying on the mindset, Phil, like, is there any significance there with the colouring on the left side, right side of the brain? Is it just, say you got them highlighted, blue, green?
Yeah, it's a good point, Steve. Yes, inquisitive as ever. Yeah, we just looked at some of the key things, and the blue stuff we looked at was pretty neutral with them, because we got to analyze and focus all the time, sort of thing. So the green one were, immediate attention. The amber one was sort of, mid-range attention. And the communicate and motivate they were pretty strong, if you like, in that area. So the green one was, immediate work-ons. The amber were more sort of medium term. And then the communicate and motivate, in this instance, he was quite a natural communicator, this guy. And he was always a positive motivator. We'd touch on that if we needed to, but those colorings are, other than the analysis and focus, because we're always asking them to do that. It was basically, what was needing immediate attention, midterm attention maybe, and the red stuff was what came natural in some ways, So that makes sense. That's how we did that. Yeah.
That's great, mate. Dill, did you want to open it up?
To have more questions, if there's more questions, is that what you mean?
Yeah, no one's coming at the moment, but if you could just continue on, if anyone wants to jump in, just use the chat line and I'll bring you in. Otherwise, Phil just continue on.
Yeah, as we're on the mental skills side of it, Steve, I'll still have a look. I'll see if I can move, bear with me, sorry, if I can move this here. This was a map that we put together for the players. We had sort of banners, maybe put this up all over the place prior to the World Cup. And, it was the Namibian RugbyWA. We talked about how we could pressure to pressure, how we could be under pressure, but then if we turn the ball over, how we could exert pressure back on the opposition. And making sure that when the pressure was on, our prime issue was our control of attention on our jobs. So we had the goal there, we had the physical goal, the team culture, technically, with the mindset in the middle, with the game plan. And we reviewed everything around, as I said earlier, the discipline, the adaptability, innovation, intensity. And this is how we sort of manage the team's emotion, if you like, during the course of the journey, Steve,
So Phil, that's 2019 leading into the World Cup.
Yeah.
If you go back at the start of your journey with after you completed 2015 World Cup and then you entered the next 4-year cycle, how different does that map look like from 2015 to say 2019?
It was, in the beginning, that map would look totally different in a way, because the players didn't have that self-awareness then that they had 4 years later. So the big thing for us was to get the players to be really self-driven and self-reliant, self-resilient. And we took a view of that was going to come from being more individually aware of themselves, self-awareness, awareness of others. So that's how that map actually ended up the way it did, was because of the work that we did, as I said earlier, on the test match readiness. The educate to motivate process really helped us get to that stage for 2019. And of course, in 2015, we had a couple of players like Jacques Berger, who was a Saracens flanker at the time. We had a lot more of a senior squad in 2015 that had a lot more rugby under their belt, if you like, than the team of 2019. So we had an average age of 31 in England, and we had an average age of 25 in Japan. And we knew we had to change that average age as we were going on, because we knew we had to increase the player depth, and we were only going to do that if we had a younger group to work with, Steve. And then they didn't have the time in the saddle that the 215 group had, but they ended up performing at a higher level than the 215 group did.
Well, I'd be interested to see, Phil, like you're planning, the holistic plan leading into the World Cup, like that cycle, that 4-year cycle, and what were the junctures that you stopped? Was it just on a yearly calendar for review? Was it periodically based on a quarterly review? Was it how did you actually go about your cycle across? So one cycle to me is a World Cup cycle. That's 4 years. So at what points did you start to manage the actual review process?
It was ongoing, Steve. Obviously, how it worked. Obviously, we had 7 weeks going into the first World Cup. So obviously we went through that process. We knew the targets we wanted to hit, and it was basically trying to get the players to be comfortable at playing 36, 37 minutes ball in play. That was one of the things we used. So as we were going along the training regime, we were making sure that all our training was relevant in order to hit those targets to go into 215. And then when we did that, afterwards, the plan in 2016 was Africa Cup. It was Super Sport Challenge and Autumn International Tour. So what we tried to do in review of the build-up for 2015 was very inconsistent. So we tried to get 3 key competition phases, if you like, that we could challenge the players on, and that's how, in a nutshell, Steve, that's how that worked.
So that's subsequently you were reviewing tournaments, so to speak.
We were reviewing tournaments along the way, yeah, absolutely, reviewing tournaments. And this was our outline planner, if you like, our macro plan during the course of, and they were like this for the previous 4 years leading into Japan. And it just gave us opportunities, as you say, to continually review each cycle. So whether, you know, as we got here, if you start in October, that was a tracker monitoring phase after the Africa Cup and Super Sport. Then we went into November. Then obviously is a rest period. Namibia closes down in December, we found over time. So that was just a rest period. Then it was individual, you know, home-based players involved in Super Sport. And then we had our daily training environment and testing program linked to the Tier 1 standards. And the players we did have playing outside the country, it was very easier. We just had those normal links you'd have with professional clubs. And then that process then was built on, as you can see there, and reviewed, you know, during each phase really. So there were tournament phases, and then there were monthly phases as we went along in review of the milestones we wanted to hit, mate, you know.
So those reviews, just before we go to the chat line, I just want to stay on that, Phil, as far as what sort of content were in the sort of the macro. You've got the macro planner up there. What sort of aspects were you actually isolating to review?
I'll show, I'm going to go past this. If you look, okay, this became the performance objectives. It looks a bit colourful, but the boys, we found out they're like this was a type of way they enjoyed, and they took stuff from our presentations. So competition review, right? So we went into the Nations Cup with these type of objectives. We went into the Super Sport Challenge Cup with different objectives, and then we reviewed that, and we came up with, you know, mentally we wanted this type of culture on the tour. Discipline, we wanted to make sure that we nailed our zones, which meant we were pretty efficient in our tactical approach and technical approach to the game. You know, playing good rugby because it's courage, flair. You know, the African teams like to play that turnover stuff, and we needed a solid set piece. That was one thing that we knew we needed to improve. And during the tournament, actually, we had one of the Argentinian coaches came and did a scrum session with us. After we played Argentina in the first game, they gave us a bit of a towel in. So one came, and, you know, to be fair to their coaches, we came and we had a bit of a training session together. You know, and we were able to train at, you know, at a high level of intensity, you know, against the team we played first. So we learned the lessons, and we sort of implemented that learning to move forward to the next game. You know, adaptability, we knew we needed to adapt our kicking game. We were okay at kicking out and defending from line-out structure, but we weren't great on kicking long and on because of certain deficiencies in some of our front five forwards, fitness, and slow ball. We were great when the flow of the game was going on, but we wanted to learn if we, you know, how we could adapt the slow ball to regain momentum. And then, you know, these are the key things we looked at in terms of intensity, getting off the ground, speed off the ground. We call that RTA within 3 seconds. Delta plays, which are very direct with us. And again, going back to the, you know, the set piece, could we maul, could we stay in the fight at the scrum? So those were the objectives, Steve, that we were constant, we were working, and then that's how we reviewed each of the matches and the tournament itself, you know, mate. And it led to that process for the World Cup. You know, that's a bit of an outline again, but that's the review that came out of the key points, I should say, came out of the review for the Uruguayan match, you know. So the dream has always been to win a game, and that's still the dream. You know, what we needed to do, we knew we had to be, you know, Tier 1 test match ready as a team and individuals. And then, you know, how were we going to do it? So those were the key elements of how we were going to do it. The culture was important to that as well, obviously. clear selection. That was the feedback we had of the players. Game by game improvements, that was important. And they liked the review process. They enjoyed the gap analysis of where they were and where they needed to get to. That really motivated them. Like I said to you before, we used a picture of a petrol tank, you know, sort of filling up slowly but surely towards a target. So yeah, that was a review of, I suppose, the review of 4 years of how we needed to approach the World Cup, you know.
Excellent, mate. So we might open it up, Dill. There's a few on the chat line.
Yeah, so I'll bring in Dan first, mate. You're off mute now, and then I'll bring Ross in after that.
Thanks, Dylan, and thanks, Phil. Thanks for giving us your time this evening. Really appreciate the insights and very entertaining as well. Phil, a question, it's obviously quite a large investment of the coaching staff's time and your time in terms of the self-develop or the personal development of the players and the self-awareness. How important is that for the head coach, and how much more effective are you as a coach because you put that investment of time in with the players? And does coaching become easier because of it?
Yeah, it certainly does. What I found over time, it's a great question. And what I found over time is that the more you get to know the players, it's a big advantage. Because you get to know them as human beings, obviously, and their trials and tribulations away from the rugby field, particularly with the Namibian boys, because a lot of them worked their jobs, day jobs in Windhoek, and you know that sort of understanding led you to be sensitive to to their situation. That was very, very important, I think, and having a plan, having a process that you can work towards and keep that process evolving, keep consistency within the process, because you've always got points of reference to go back to and review, what you did well, what you think you can improve on. And those are the two important things that I found that I really enjoyed that process. I love coaching the African boys. It was amazing. 5 years, in another country like that was incredible. And spending so much time out there, getting acquainted with, the local customs and, the Windhoek lager, which is brilliant stuff. You can get very drunk, but you won't have a hangover, which is great because of the way it's brewed. But it was just really getting to know the players, getting to know and respect the culture that they were brought up in, and trying to help them improve, really. And it was all about developing our skills, but also then having an ability to transfer those skills, to build capability and the capacity in the country to leave a legacy after we'd gone, sort of thing, So that was a huge experience, and the process and the review of the process and getting to know people were crucial.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks for that. How good's Shark Burger?
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's a mad bloke. He's a mad person.
I can imagine. Yeah. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Awesome. Okay, Roscoe, you're off mute, mate. Off you go.
Thanks, Phil, for giving up your time for this. Really appreciate it. I just wondered, how much of a say do the players have in the objectives and therefore then the review process? And is the review process player-led first and the coaches do a separate one, or is it all in together? Obviously, particularly with the World Cup cycles you spoke about with the aging, where you had the different age groups with the 2 World Cup cycles, how that sort of review works between cycles as well.
Yeah, in the beginning, Ross, a good question again. In the beginning, it was a little bit autocratic because there wasn't a consistent process there. So we said, look, this is we gave a bit of time in terms of the way we were playing. And then we sort of broke that down, why we needed to change, and they understood that. And then they had a big part in growing that. The culture was, we need a good team spirit, work ethic, discipline, punctuality. So we sort of imposed that at the start, but we asked them what it looked like. So they were very much involved from the start. And as we went along, the way we played, they had a massive part in it. And we introduced a process which you've all sort of heard now, weekly tactical periodization, where we had learning days, intensity days, transition days, speed days. And when we get to the speed day, it was also a clarity session. So it was, it was their understanding of what we were trying to do on a match day, which really came on. So some of the coaches we brought in were quite nervous in the beginning because they had, as the week went on, their role was, was becoming less and less and less. So the players, the last meeting of the week, the players would always get up and say, right, this is what we're going to do tactically. This is what we need to do technically. This is how we need to be mentally, type of thing, and they would just bang, they would put it up there. So really challenge your coaching, to be really clear and concise in those early days in the week in order for the players to be able to implement it on a Saturday. And our focus on our game rehearsal day was always the first 20 minutes. So you'd have a clarity session on a Thursday, we train, and then we come back for the captain's run, and that would be totally run by the players. Right, what's our first 20-minute focus, blah, 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 because we always had a goal of starting the game well in that first quarter mentality, which I mentioned earlier on. So it was, that's how we evolved him, really. We always involved the players, but in the first instance, it was a little bit more autocratic because there wasn't a clear system in place, not a clear culture, not a clear playing philosophy. So we needed everybody to be looking through one lens, not 5 or 6 senior players looking through their lens, and everybody else was trying to catch up, type of thing. So the players had a massive role in it all, and it was quite evident in their behaviours at the end, really, which was lovely, which was great to see, really. You've got to involve the players, but sometimes you've got to give them a structure, ask them what it looks like to them, and as they grow their experience and awareness, they start shaping it themselves. But I think it's important a coach gives them a framework that they can ultimately, populate and evolve, with their own thinking as you move forward. But the framework allows the coach to keep order, as Jack Gibson used to say, rugby league coach, Australian coach, got to keep order in the place. But you need to give the players, the capacity to grow and to add value.
Great, thanks.
Just staying on that train of thought there, Phil, just moving away from match review, the operational review. So, like, just say end of tournament review. We're not looking at, the match statistics or performance. We're looking more at the operations, the supporting support operations to your squad. What sort of areas would you involve the senior player group, as an example, or the captain in that review process?
Well, could I share one more slide, Dylan?
Yeah, of course,
Yes,
of course.
yes.
Please, sorry, mate.
No worries.
This one, Steve, this is... this was going into the World Cup, Steve, and during the World Cup. This was our sort of coaching delivery framework, which again gave us the review process, as you can see on it. So if you, as you're looking at the screen, if you go in sort of, from the left, we had a way that we were, our performance analysis looked. We had the 3 threes, we called it, our coaching framework. So the priorities of our coaching. And then on the right, we had a weekly tactical periodization. And then we had a World Cup theme. Like the Namibian boys love the Fast and Furious movie series. If you ask them to give you a movie on your hard drive, if you're bored in your hotel room, you'll always have one of those. So we sort of made a theme of Fast and Furious, and everything we did, will it make the car go faster? Physically, we knew we had to be tier 1 test match ready. Mentally was our abilities to think correctly under pressure. And our match by match themes, as you can see there, Italy was speed, South Africa leave a mark, New Zealand was Everest, and Canada was expectation. And it was all underpinned by a weekly review process, was discipline of the way we were playing, the way we were operating, our ability to adapt, during matches, off the field, at training venues if things weren't going right, and our innovation you know, in our plan, did we need innovation? Were we, you know, performing at the right intensity levels in relation to GPS that we were trying to achieve? You know, and that system really of review underpinned that whole framework that you can see there, Steve. You know, and that's sort of summarised. There's a lot more detail, as I've shown earlier on, with individual player profiling and mental skills approach, etc. But that was how we went through. You know, we went through the World Cup, and there were other versions of this during the course of the 4-year cycle, mate, which were always, as I say, worked around that review process. Yep. So that's how that was. There's a lot of detail on this one, but because we're going into tournaments and you have got, you know, and because I was remotely managing the program at times, we created, you know, the detail in the coaching framework looked like this. So the outcome was always training above the game to get to tier 1 and keep educating to motivate. So we had a warm-up approach, carousel work for skill work, unit, teamwork, and then analysis. So that was a bit more detail around what we were reviewing. But you know, the first, going back to this slide, Steve, Dylan, that was how we, you know, we sort of outlined the process of delivery, and then that provided the process of review with that detail that I previously mentioned. And it's all adaptable and changeable in terms of detail into our coaching. You know, breakdown work, there's numerous drills for that, obviously. High hand catching, you know, scrum work, live machine, there's loads of different, you know, drills that you put into all of that, as we all know. But that was the framework and some of the detail within the framework, and then that led to our review process being pretty, you know, pretty consistent, pretty forensic when required, you know.
That's good, mate. I just want to jump again back to the operations that, you know, like, I'm interested in how you involved, say, a captain or a senior player in a post-tournament review. So was there anyone that you sort of, from your playing group, that you sat down with, say, I don't know, your team manager and your chief executive, or did you involve your senior players in that type of review, Phil, or was that sort of kept to the staff?
No, I'll show you this little colourful slide. No, we had our captain, obviously our vice captain, and then we picked. Our captain and our vice captain were selected through by the players. I gave a set of criteria to the players, and I asked them to pick, you know, a captain and a vice captain from that criteria. So they had a say in the captain and the vice captain, so they believed in the leadership. And then they were asked to provide another 3 players. We had a panel of 5 players that formed the players' leadership group. And I wanted, you know, players, not just a group of senior players. I wanted a group of influential players as part of this process that you can see on the screen. So we had 5 players with our head of strength and conditioning, head of medical, head of performance analysis, and myself, who sat down and looked at, you know, the discipline of our program, you know, preparation. What was a consistency of our application to the plan that we had, you know, on a team and individual basis, for example, Steve. Then the adaptability, you know, do we tactically adapt, you know, were we innovative when we needed to be in a tournament or in a phase review? And intensity, are we improving our ability to, you know, perform under pressure, basically? You know, there are quite a few, you know, subtitles you can add to discipline, adaptability, and intensity. But as an outline, you know, that's what we used to do. And the group, those were the, you know, groups we had in, you know, heads of department from a staffing perspective. And then obviously those 5 players that everyone believed in, really. That's what I found with, if you appoint a captain without getting, you know, you can have a feel of what the players think about a captain, but You need to be, we put a criteria to the players, and we were really confident then that they believed and they supported the captain wholeheartedly because they ultimately selected him.
Yeah, I think this particular area, Phil, for me is one of the areas where actually it's an area that we're focusing on currently in our academy, where we're trying to evolve our players into a more we call it leadership, but at the same time we want them more a part of what we're doing program wise. I think it's a work in progress, and I'm talking across the nation at the moment. Certainly having senior players involved in the overarching program of review is critical. They're a major part. Well, they are why we are. They are why we exist as a coach. So they need, by default, they should be a part of that program. And the second part of it is, as I said, we're going through a process of education at the moment. And, what does that look like for the player in terms of leadership? So it's not just about playing the game. They should be a major part of, the systems and the processes of the game. As I said, it's a big piece in our current academy program. This sort of developing the players' mindset around actually not just turning up and thinking that everything's going to happen for them, that the coaches and the managers are going to do the job for them. So involving players in that review I was very interested to see how you had integrated your players back into that review program.
Yeah, I think we've all heard the saying of Arsene Wenger, players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that, I know, that is really important. That's why when you're developing a culture, it's so important to get a clear why in the culture, the purpose of the program, and the buy-in of the players. Like in Namibia, we came up with striving, to achieve excellence, pride and identity through the game of rugby. That's what got the boys out of bed in the morning, because, they didn't want to let their families down. They didn't want to let, their fish eagle, they're very proud of the fish eagle on their shirt. So it was all about, getting them, to play for the name on the front of the shirt, not the back of the shirt, but to really find out give them a really strong purpose, a strong why they were getting out of bed and why we were working. And it all came down to pride, and it came down to family, and it came down to, wanting to look good, and do the country proud, that type of stuff, Steve, So it's so important that you engage the players in, in the mental, the physical, the technical, the tactical aspects in order for them to buy in, to drive the culture. Because the culture is the engine of your organisation, if it's set up properly and in a constructive manner, and you can achieve a lot, people say you need money to achieve. Yeah, you do need a certain prerequisite, because it provides the resource for you to drive the reality of your performance. But you can do so many different things innovatively if you think, like that, think holistically, and involve the players in everything, but involve them around a framework, so you've all got, common points of reference to refer back to.
Yeah, for sure. Dill, is there anyone on the chat line?
Yeah, there's a couple more. So Colin's just asked me to send this question across. So Phil, just in regards to the coaches from a club point of view that you had to deal with over the World Cup cycle, and how did you look to engage them, and what support did you get from them during that process?
A lot of beer involved. It was relatively easy in some ways, Dill, because there's only, I think there were 10 Premier teams? No, 8 Premier teams, sorry, 8 Premier teams. There's under 1,000 players playing domestic rugby in Namibia. So one of the biggest challenges, grow the game, grow the playing numbers, But it was, we understood at the beginning that we needed to grow a playing pathway. So we needed to have a competition between club and international rugby. So we went and, we delivered the plan to each and every club chairman, club club chairman, club coach. So we sort of engaged that way. Some were slower than others to come on board, you know, but in the end, you know, we were inviting them to come along and watch training. We were training against the clubs. So the national team against the clubs, the coach would come along, the referees would come along. So we were trying to give something back to them in terms of developing themselves and getting their club players to train against international players. You know, we invited them to games. There were you know, certain games we'd have, you know, 2 coaches from different clubs coming along to watch us play Currie Cup matches or be part of the coaching group for international matches. So those are the type of things, a lot of interaction, a lot of initiatives to get, you know, to get them on board, for them to, you know, to be understanding of what we were trying to achieve, but also try and help them in terms of growing their own club programs as well. But lots of, you know, personal interaction, lots of interaction with the team, and it went, you know, it went down well. We had a few feisty training sessions, which were quite interesting, but the referee was there for that. We had one training session which was stopped by lightning 4 times. That was quite entertaining as well. But anyway, but yeah, it's just that interaction of your plan, and an interaction that can help them grow as well, give something back to them, because they were giving you a hell of a lot by, you know, giving you the players basically. So you have to look after them, you know, by having a good interactive program.
That probably leads into a question that I had as well. So, you know, that 2015 group, you did have some professional players from outside of Namibia. What was the weighting, or was there any numbers outside of Namibia from this 2019 World Cup that you had to deal with, and how did you engage with, I guess, those external players, if there were any?
Yeah, we only had about, I think it was about 15% of players for 2015 that were professional. And, you know, Jacques Berger was a shining light. A couple of the other guys were playing professionally, were playing second division rugby in France, or maybe playing, you know, for one of the, you know, less fashionable unions, if I may say that, in South Africa, or not the strongest or most resourced union. So, yeah, they came, you know, did a good job. We engaged with their club coaches prior to that tournament, and then as we built for 2015, we actually focused more on the local player base to get more of a local identity with the team. And because that base was so young, you know, they were very impressionable, and they had a lot of energy, a lot of work ethic in them. So we really developed that group, you know, and we had maybe 20%, maybe 5% more going into 2019. But after 2019, we ended up having 40% of players who picked up professional contracts before the current crisis happened. So all of that, Dylan, really was you know, key points about dealing with the professional clubs, talking about our plan, what we were trying to do. We had a visit to all the Super Rugby franchises, for example, in South Africa, to outline our plan. And we got great support from the likes of the Sharks, the Bulls, and the Stormers, where we had players in their sort of you know, in their academies, in their Super Rugby squads, in their Currie Cup squads. So it was all about communication and interaction, basically, mate. And then growing the players, and it was you know, it was a real great sense of satisfaction for all of us when so many of them picked up contracts around the world post 2019. So now they've got 40% of the players who are currently involved in professional rugby, which is amazing for this next cycle. And because the group is so young, you know, there were 2 World Cup cycles in the group we grow for Japan. You know, obviously one for Japan, and then obviously the next one for France. So, you know, hopefully they're in a healthy position, you know.
And it must be really rewarding to see those players, you know, pick up pro contracts. So that was awesome.
That was good. Very good. Good testimony to them. Brilliant.
All right, Endo. Happy, mate?
Yeah, happy as. Fantastic, Phil. So, guys, if there's no more questions, I'm conscious of time. We always stay on that hour and a half mark. We're right on it. So, so again, any questions, any further questions out there that you want to field, or nothing coming through, Dill?
Actually, we've got one more. Is mic's not really working, but I'll just ask it for him. So he's asked if what's more important to you? Is it around knowing the process or knowing the players / people?
Knowing the people and the process, because they'll knowing the people, above the process in the first instance, because if you know the people, they're the ones that are going to drive the process. You can drive the process as a coach, but if they're not, if they're not engaged in it, you've got no chance. So I think it's that's why the people is so important. Or over the years, we've had some great Australian players at Leeds. Dan Crowley was the most. We nearly signed Joe Roff at one point because his girlfriend was in Leeds studying, but with Dan Crowley there, and kept in touch with him since. He's a great guy. South African players, like Bram van Straten and Sneijman back in the day, great players. Justin Marshall, great players. But it was all about getting to know them and their families before they arrived, and then growing that relationship when they were actually in our care, if you like. So important knowing the players and their families really, and helping them and enjoying the journey together. So the players are the fuel of they're the petrol of the car really.
That's perfect. Thanks, Phil.
Pleasure. And if anybody wants the slides, Steve, you've got them all. Yep. If any of the boys want to look at anything, except it's no problem sharing.
All right, guys. Look, we'll leave it there. Once again, Phil, thanks for your preparation in particular. There's a lot of time that went into that, and we're very appreciative of that time and energy, and it showed in your presentation and discussion. Very enlightening, and obviously with so much career experience behind you, we're never in doubt. It was always going to be enlightening, and there's a lot of depth in there too, mate. And I'm sure we're going to get some requests or further requests around some of the slides that you presented. So hopefully we can link up again at some stage in the future. So on behalf of the group, just like to thank you and wish you all the best for the future. We'll be in contact. I owe you a couple of points, not 1 point. I owe you a couple of points. So thanks very much, Phil.
Yes, thanks, mate, as well. Thanks to the coaches for giving up their time as well to listen, and thanks for the questions as well. And thank you, Dylan. So thanks a lot, Steve. It's a pleasure, and thanks for asking me. Thank you. Good luck to everyone.
Much, Phil. Awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Thanks again, Phil. Coaches, we'll see you next week.
See you, boys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.